The question was a will and a nomination form. Does it work hand in hand? What does it matter to the trustees? The reality is we have to determine who to pay the benefits to. The trustees make a decision on who to pay and how to pay them. Your will, your nomination form, all that information helps us make that decision. But it does not determine who we pay the benefit to. But without that information, it makes it very hard for us to make a decision at the end of the day.
Before we go, I just have one or two other items just to work through. I think it's just important to also just, from the trustee side, you've seen the trustees up here. You've seen there's employee trustees and employer trustees. The employee trustees are obviously elected by yourselves. The employer trustees are elected by the employer. Now, also to protect you, they are in the defined benefit fund. There are two external employer trustees, Mr. Francois Cooper and Mr. Steve Rousseau. They do not work for the university. They have no connection for the university, other than Mr. Rousseau is on our investment committee and a trust of our UJ trust. And Mr. Francois Cooper was an ex-partner of PwC who did years of pension fund audits, and they are independent people. In the defined contribution fund, we have Mr. Cooper as an independent. So although there's employer elected trustees, there are independents in there, and they work based on the Financial Services Board's requirements. Then the trustees also has two specific committees. There's an investment committee who has specialists on it, which works with the investment bank, our investment mandate partners, which work with our Alexander Forbes, and work with Alexander Forbes Economic Unit. And on 4 times a year, the investment committee sits. They listen at the asset managers. They listen to the economic side of it, and then with the assistance of all these, they decide, are we changing or not changing? So, and then they report to the trustees. We also have a financial risk and audit committee, which consists again of trustees and external people, that manages to make sure that the audit are done, that the financial risks are properly managed, and that the risk register of the trust and the pension fund is done properly. It is also important to understand this is an independent fund. We do not belong to Old Mutual or Sanlam. Therefore, it's called the University of Johannesburg Defined Benefit and University of Johannesburg Pension Fund. It belongs to you. There's no big brother looking after it. So you need to be activists in your pension fund. You need to make sure and understand your pension fund. When the election for trustees come up, you need to elect a trustee. You need to say, this person as an employee should represent me. There's no big brother here that will look after you. We have to look after ourselves. And I think that's the other important thing. And then the last thing which Yvette did indicate, the trustees has the responsibility to pay your death benefit. And that is by law. The Pension Fund Act, I think Section 80.
36.
Section 36 of the Act says the death benefit will be paid to these type of people. And as trustees, we have to find them. So therefore the nomination and, as you say, the will is important. But it does not direct purely because it is a death benefit. And what the Act says is if you had an economic dependent person, you have the liability, or beyond your death, you still have the liability to support that person. So in a lot of cases, you get people that's really cross, especially the kids or the wife that sits in front of Yvette and says, but how can he have said that person is a dependent? Parents-in-law is a dependent because I hate my parents-in-law. That's life. If his parents or your kids or his kids or whoever, the girlfriend, was financially dependent on that person, the trustees has the liability to do it. And we know sometimes people are unhappy. But you must realize that's a legal requirement. And if we do not do that, that person can sue us in our personal capacities because we have not conformed to the Act. So therefore, there's quite a long process, sometimes 6 months. We had one case, you'll remember the case of the professor that was murdered here in Melville. That took about 18 months for us to solve the case. And we had senior counsel giving us advice on how that money must be done. So it's very important for you to understand it is a very sensitive issue at that point of death, but unfortunately there's liabilities and requirements from the Act on the trustees to do certain things. And I think that's quite important to understand, that it's not because we don't like the nominations on non-nominated persons. There are strict requirements for us to do that and to put the necessary steps in place that any financial dependent has been looked after.
The University of Johannesburg. Rethink, reinvent.